I'd uncovered enough to know that Aunt Lavinia's brooch was no ordinary ornament. It seemed to drain her only to bloom again, binding her health and beauty to its shifting rose. When I dared to ask, she told me, in a voice both mocking and grave, that it gave her what it took, essence drawn from others. I tried to laugh it off, but the dreams, the scratch at my wrist, and the petals on my pillow told me otherwise. I avoided Aunt Lavinia as much as I could. Yet despite my best efforts, she always seemed to be there, forever watchful, the beveled edge of her brooch glinting, casting small rectangles of emerald light like tiny green eyes, unblinking in the shadows. I saw little point in confiding in Mother. Aunt Lavinia could do no wrong in her eyes. She wouldn't have a word said against her, a willing captive of her enduring spell. Instead, I resigned myself to defeat. Then one day Mrs Strace entered our lives, a recent widow who rented the house next door. Plain and unadorned, Mrs Strace's grey eyes peered through you, travelling through your clothes and skin, penetrating you to the bone. Her gaze, heavy with judgment, seemed to know your every sin. She always wore the same blouse, cardigan and skirt in shades of gloomy morning grey. They matched the colour of her hair, which was pulled tight into a severe bun. A sudden electric outage proved to be the catalyst for our first encounter. Mother, panicked by the sudden dark, grabbed my hand and marched me to Mrs Strace's front door. Mother provided a flustered explanation, while Mrs Strace, standing with arms folded in the doorway, listened quietly throughout. "No doubt something tripped the mains," Mrs Strace said. She nodded towards our house. "Lead the way. We'll have it sorted in a jiff." Mother blessed the day Mrs Strace came into our lives, words she would later come to retract. Yet before that time, Mrs Strace remained a sobering influence. "I'm not your aunt," she often reminded me. "I know your mother refers to me as such, but I prefer it if you call me Mrs Strace." "Fine," I said. Not that I would have had it any other way. It was a listless September afternoon when Mrs Strace and Aunt Lavinia finally met. Aunt Lavinia had graced us with one of her impromptu visits, only to find Mother and Mrs Strace chatting over a pot of tea at the kitchen table. Mrs Strace and Aunt Lavinia acknowledged each other with a cold smile. There was no hint of warmth in Mrs Strace's eyes as she studied the glamorous, raven-haired woman standing before her. The conversation was strained, with everyday pleasantries exchanged in short, broken sentences, easing itself into a natural lull. The room waited with bated breath until Mrs Strace broke the silence. "That's an interesting brooch," she said. "It's vintage lucite, isn't it? My mother had one just like it." "I very much doubt that," came Aunt Lavinia's curt reply. Mrs Strace frowned. "I beg your pardon?" "I very much doubt your mother owns such a brooch." Aunt Lavinia smiled. "It's rare, you see, a one-off. And it's not lucite, it's rare crystal." Mrs Strace rolled her eyes. "Someone's taken you for a ride, my dear. It isn't rare at all. They were mass-produced in the 60s. I've seen dozens of them." Aunt Lavinia sighed. "Similar, perhaps, but I can assure you your mother did not possess one such as this." Mrs Strace gave her a look that a tired adult often casts at a bothersome child. "Granted, the rose looks fairly unique, but I'd wager if you searched the bric-and-brac shops in the area, you'd find one just like it. Aunt Lavinia remained composed. I very much doubt that. She touched the brooch with her finger. See for yourself. Come closer. Take a better look. Mrs. Strace leaned forward, the dismissive look on her face quickly fading. Interesting. How they made the rose look so real. Her eyes narrowed. Then she glanced at the window as though looking to the light for reassurance. It's almost what? Asked Aunt Lavinia with a smile. It's almost as if the rose... Mrs. Strace shook her head. No, it can't be. Those beveled edges, they play tricks with the light. She stood up and, glancing at Mother, said, I'll let you and Lavinia catch up. I've lots to be getting on with. Her sudden exit took me by surprise. Her hurried steps reminding me of a startled rabbit who had narrowly escaped the poacher's trap. After that day, the two women rarely crossed paths, and when they did, their conversation was brief. Mrs. Strace seemed the more vicious of the two, her catty remarks knowing no bounds in Aunt Lavinia's absence. And what does she do for a living? She once asked. Mother shrugged. She deals in antiques, I think. Mrs. Strace gave a dismissive, antiques. It doesn't appear to pay her way. I've noticed her asking you for money on a few occasions. Small loans here and there, Mother said. Who can you ask if you can't ask friends? A true friend wouldn't ask. She threw me a disparaging glance. It seems your son isn't the only one who's easily taken in. Mother didn't respond, growing more pensive as the days passed. Mother's newfound reticence did not pass unnoticed. Aunt Lavinia tolerated without comment until one day she said, Have I done anything to upset you? Mother, caught off guard, instinctively said, No. Aunt Lavinia sighed. We are friends, are we not? Yes. Then we owe it to each other not to lie. I didn't know how to approach it, Mother said. The money you borrowed, Aunt Lavinia opened her purse and took out a thin fold of notes. Why didn't you say? She pushed the money into Mother's hand. To be honest, I'd forgotten all about it. A gentle reminder would have sufficed, turning her back on Mother before she could respond, and then marching out of the house. Much to Mother's deep distress, we saw nothing of Aunt Lavinia for weeks. There's no need to fret, dear, Mrs. Strace maintained. You've done nothing wrong. The true nature of that woman's friendship is conspicuous by her absence. Mrs. Strace quickly stepped into Aunt Lavinia's shadow, Mother growing more dependent on her as the days passed. For all her faults, Aunt Lavinia possessed a great sense of humour. I never once heard Mrs. Strace make a joke, often standing with arms folded, never pretending that life could be anything other than hard, dull, and unyielding. Mrs. Strace remained equally cold towards me, never cruel or unkind, just indifferent, acknowledging me with a brief nod whenever I entered the room. I tried making her laugh once, retelling a joke I'd heard at school. She just stared at me with those cold, unblinking eyes. Such tales are for small children. You're a big boy now. I never initiated a conversation with her after that, only speaking when spoken to, limiting my responses to thank you, yes, or no. As the months passed, I noted subtle changes in Mrs. Strace. She began to misplace things and repeat herself in conversation. She'd tell Mother about some recent event only to falter mid-sentence and then fall silent, as the memories slipped away. I watched her once, frantically search for her glasses until suddenly realizing they were perched on top of her head. Her face turned bright crimson when she saw me, but her anger quickly masked her embarrassment. The lines on her face deepened, and Mrs Strace, always a prime example of good posture, began to stoop. She seemed to be growing old. Of course, she always seemed old to me, yet a harsher kind of aging had taken root, her spirit fading, devoured by something unseen. Then one morning, Mrs Strace fell ill. I failed to share Mother's surprise. The woman's rapid decline made it inevitable. Sadly, within days, Mrs Strace died, and Mother, like our neighbours, mourned in silent disbelief. Shortly after the funeral, Aunt Lavinia returned. Her long hair shone lustrous beneath the mid-autumn light, her eyes glowing against her smooth skin. And in all the time I'd known her, I'd never seen her look so beautiful. For all Mother's scolding, I had never questioned the closeness of our bond. She was my mother. That attribute alone guaranteed her love for me. I was never a needy child, but Aunt Lavinia's return made me feel increasingly estranged, worsened by Mother's growing distance towards me. I tried convincing myself it was all my imagination, but the signs were all too apparent. We never spent time together like we used to. Her mind was constantly elsewhere. On the rare occasion that Aunt Lavinia wasn't at the house, Mother pined for her return. An intimacy grew between them, a bond that I failed to comprehend until years later. Aunt Lavinia sensed my distress. I'd catch her watching me sometimes, her eyes glinting with amusement. No matter how hard I tried, I failed to ignore the brooch. That rose grew more vibrant by the day, drawing my gaze whenever I saw it. A stupid notion, perhaps, that a piece of jewellery, no matter how strange, could drain the life of someone. Yet I couldn't rid the idea from my mind, and it grew more intense the longer I dwelled on it. I kept thinking about poor Mrs Strace, her mind slowly unravelling until she faded into non-existence. The more I thought about her, the longer I gazed at the brooch, knowing the poor woman's demise was no accident. Suspicion blistered inside me. I began watching Aunt Lavinia more closely, following the sound of her laughter, which came to a sudden hush whenever I entered the room. I had no doubt she had been talking about me, amusing herself and Mother, it seemed, by always belittling me. It came to a head one foggy December evening after dinner. Aunt Lavinia and Mother had already opened their second bottle of wine, their laughter growing more intolerable. Usually I would have retreated to my room, but the cold kept me near the fire. I don't recall how the conversation turned to me. One minute, Aunt Lavinia was listing the faults of some unfortunate soul who had crossed her, and the next, she fixed a gaze on me. "You're very quiet these days," she said. "You're like a shadow, skulking about the house. We barely hear a squeak from you." "He gets more like his father every day," Mother slurred. "It takes the pleasure out of life. Too much introspection." Aunt Lavinia sipped her wine. "Oh, I don't know. It's better to have some degree of thoughtfulness than none at all." She swirled the wine in her glass. "But the boy is hindered by his vivid imagination. He can barely look at me." She released a cruel laugh. "And the terror in his eyes whenever he glances at my brooch. You used to be so enchanted by it. Do you remember? I stared into the fire, watching the flames, feeling the heat lap across my skin. Mother reached from her chair and tapped my shoulder. Aunt Lavinia asked you a question. Be polite enough to give her an answer. I kept staring into the fire. Don't be so rude, Mother said. What on earth's gotten into you? I turned to face Aunt Lavinia. It's just a brooch, I said with a shrug. I don't know why I ever found it so interesting. Aunt Lavinia's eyes never left mine. Oh, I think you do. Some things have a way of possessing you, regardless of whether you want them to. Later that night, kneeling on my bed, I watched the rain from the window. Hatred and embarrassment raging inside me. I determined she would laugh at me no more. A simple enough plan, easily deployed in those quiet hours after midnight. After creeping across the landing, I slipped quietly into Aunt Lavinia's room. A heady floral scent thickened the air, and for a moment I struggled to breathe, suppressing each cough as her perfume seeped into my chest. But somehow I managed to keep silent. To this day I remain unsure whether my aunt lay on the bed, or if the quilt formed a huddled shape. Yet I'm convinced I saw its slow rise and fall, and heard the faint murmur of her breath. Her clothes rested on a chair, and her brooch, fastened to her blouse, glinted against the faint traces of light. Never since have I been so engrossed in a task. The world faded around me, while I unpinned the brooch from her blouse, my heart thumping against the silence. I have no recollection of my escape. All I recall is lying on my bed, clenching the brooch in my fist. The final part of Aunt Lavinia's brooch arrives this Thursday at 9 a.m. Give this story a like to help keep these dark, true encounters alive. And subscribe so you don't miss how this unsettling tale comes to an end.